Sometimes it's hard to hear a big story, but when you hear a smaller story, it really hits home, makes you understand how hard it's like. You know what the term Holocaust means? Anybody here?
Genocide of millions of Jews and other people.
Holocaust is associated with the extermination of the Jewish people. And genocide, you're right, that's Holocaust. And genocide is the deliberate extermination of any group done by a government of some kind. It's not just a group of people which is well organized, which is really big tragedy. People have choices. Sometimes they're given just nothing but bad choices. Sometimes they're not given any choices. But you have choices in the United States, and you young people do. Choices being a bystander or an upstander. A bystander who sees something, does nothing. An upstander will speak up for what he or she sees as something that is not acceptable and try to do something about it. And hopefully you will be upstanders. When you listen to Daniel speak today, you have an opportunity that your children someday will never have, because these Holocaust survivors are aging, of course, and will not be alive to tell your children what they went through. So you have an opportunity to listen to living history and to ask questions. But you have an obligation. Your job is to listen and tell your friends, family, and your future children this story. Someday you might hear someone say that Holocaust or genocide never happens or never happened. Your job is to say, no, you're wrong. I met Daniel Goldsmith. He went through it, he survived it, and I talked to him. So then you will become the storytellers and the witnesses. And now, Daniel.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm looking at you and I'm saying to myself, try to connect with me, because everything that happened to me, I was your age and younger. So try to feel, what I'm saying. So today I'm going to tell you the story of my family. It's my father, my mother, my sister, and myself during the Holocaust. It's a very, very short version, which covers the period of 1939 to 1945, when my sister was just about born and I was 8 years old. So first, some background information. Okay, that's a map of Europe that I drew back in 1947. And I lived in Belgium, and Belgium, And Belgium is that little triangle right there. By the way, everything that you see that's in red in Europe are all the countries that Germany conquered during World War II. So we lived in one of those countries. Belgium is about the size of the state of Maryland. It's quite small. And it's bilingual. We speak Flemish and French here. At the time of the beginning of World War II, there were approximately 65,000 Jewish people that lived in Belgium. And we lived in the Jewish section of a city called Antwerp. Next picture. Those are my parents. It's a wedding picture. My parents were Ruchel and Chaim Goldschmidt. So my name used to be Goldschmidt until I became an American citizen, and then I changed it to Goldsmith. So they were originally from Poland. They came to Belgium as single people in the late 1920s and they got married in 1930. My parents were middle-class people. My father was a plumber. He had his own business, and my mother was a homemaker. My parents were also religious, so we had a kosher home. We observed all the Jewish holidays, and we went to synagogue every week. In addition to that, my parents were also multilingual, meaning they spoke French and Flemish, German, Polish, and Russian. Next picture. That's me. I was born on December 11th, 1931, which makes me 83 years young. And by the way, that's how pictures were taken in those days, on the fur rug. Anyway, I do remember a very normal childhood. Next picture. That's a picture of my father, my mother, and I when I was a couple of years old. And then at the age of 6.5, I went to an all-day Hebrew school. I also would like to explain to you the pictures. Some pictures that you're seeing are old pictures that my mother was able to save. And some of the pictures, like this one over here, you're going to see pictures that I took when I went back 40 years later after I came to this country. So I came here in 1948. These are pictures from 1988. And I want to let you know I couldn't get into the school, even though you can see over here, it does say Tachkamoni School. It says the same thing in Hebrew over here. But the school was closed, and you can see it's somewhat fortified. It's got these concrete blocks and stanchions and metal gates, security camera. That was in 1988. Today, it's even worse. Anti-Semitism is worse in Europe than it was then. I could not get in there. I wanted to take pictures. So here are some pictures. Next picture. That's my kindergarten picture. And that's my kindergarten teacher, and I am right there between the two girls. The kindergarten was the only, since it was a religious school, kindergarten was the only time that boys and girls were together. After that, they separated the boys and the girls. And next picture. This is my first grade picture. That's my secular principal. We had secular subjects in the morning and religious subjects in the afternoon. So this is my secular principal, my secular teacher, and you can see it's all boys now, and I am right there in the front row. And then on December 25, 1939, my sister Lillian was born. And I do remember how happy we were at that occasion because World War II had already started. World War II started on September 1, 1939, when Germany invaded Poland. So here my sister was born in December, at least that was a happy point. So this is, at this point, I am 8 years old. Now to my story. Belgium was invaded by Germany on May 10, 1940, and our family, along with thousands of other people from Belgium, tried to flee Belgium on foot. We were trying to go towards northern France. Unfortunately, the Germans caught up with us within 2 weeks. I made everybody turn around and go back where they came from. So we went back to Antwerp. And there my parents tried to reestablish a normal life, but it only lasted a very, very short time. Because very soon, the anti-Jewish decrees and regulations and restrictions were issued. And here they are in chronological order. So I'm going to tell you the ones that happened in Belgium and the dates, but everything that I'm telling you here also happened in all the other countries that were in red in Europe. So the first one was issued on October 23, 1940, when ritual slaughter, that's making kosher, that's the way you kill animals, is a special way, and that was prohibited. Then on October 28, 1940, Jewish people had to register with the Germans and were eliminated from the legal and teaching professions. May 31, 1941, Jewish people had to display signs on their stores or businesses that they were owned by Jewish people, and non-Jewish people actually were urged not to patronize those stores. Don't go there. August 29, 1941, a curfew was set for Jewish people only between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m., thereby restricting freedom of movement. We could no longer enter public places. Imagine not being able to go to a park. We couldn't go to the movies. We couldn't go to a museum. We couldn't go any public place anymore. Jewish people were restricted to live in the four largest cities in Belgium, which were Brussels, Antwerp, Liège, and Charleroi. Then on November 25, 1941, all Jewish children were expelled from public schools. March 11, 1942, the Nazis imposed a special forced labor on Jewish people, and the last edict came on May 27, 1942, where all Jews had to wear yellow stars. So the yellow stars were about this big, and we had to wear it on our outer clothing. I remember wearing mine on the lapel. So as you can see, little by little, in a very, very calculated way, the Nazis stripped us of our civil and economic rights, and it took only a little over 1.5 years. That's how quickly you can lose your freedom. Cherish it. It was very well planned and executed, and to us it was absolutely and incredibly demoralizing. And it was under these orders and regulations and restrictions that we tried to live as best as we could, which was becoming hard because food was becoming scarce, and because of the restrictions, my father had less and less work, thereby diminishing our income. And life became very tense at home because we stayed mostly cooped up, because we couldn't go out to the normal places that we normally were able to go to. Next picture. This is the last picture of myself and my sister Lillian that was taken before things got really bad in 1942. And so on August 4th, 1942, my father received a notice in the mail to go to a forced labor camp in northern France. And I remember my parents talking about what action to take because I happened to be in the kitchen where they were discussing that. It turns out that my father's view prevailed. He was young, he was only 39, he was in very good health, and he felt he could survive a labor camp. But what my father and my mother did not know at that particular time, and incidentally, most people in the world did not know about these things at that particular time. There were two things. One was called the initiation of the final solution, which was the total destruction of European Jewry, and the other one was the existence of the concentration camps. People didn't know about it at that time. The Nazis kept it secret. So, next picture. My father, along with thousands of other Jews, reported to the train station. This is a picture of the train station in Antwerp. You can see it's very large, glass dome, many tracks leading into it. And we went to the train station on August 15, 1942. My mother, my sister, and I went to say goodbye to him. And I'll never forget the party scene. There were literally thousands of people there saying goodbye to their loved ones. A lot of crying, a lot of kissing, a lot of hugging. And in particular, I remember what my father said to me, reading these words, word for word. He said, "You're the little man in the house now, and you'll have to take care of your mother and your sister until I come back. And I told him I would. I took it very seriously. And that was really the day I lost my childhood. I was only 10 years old. Next picture. A little later, we received a postcard from my father, and you can see over here it's addressed to 3040 Kortekiewicz, which is where we live. There is a German cancellation stamp. Here's the French cancellation stamp, and it says over here, Pas de Calais. And Pas de Calais was a city in northern France. So indeed, he was there. At the back of it, next picture, he wrote, that's in Flemish, by the way, he wrote that he's near Boulogne, and greetings to everybody. That's it, that's all he was able to write on the card. Back home, it became gradually more difficult to live day by day. The restrictions were in full force, and by that time, we had little money left. So my mother started selling some of my father's tools just to have enough money to buy food and to take care of the house that we lived in. But my mother also was quite a woman. She had great foresight. And what she did is, that even though we lived in a Jewish quarter of Antwerp, the street that we lived on, 40 was half Jewish and half non-Jewish. And so we had some very, very good non-Jewish friends. And what she did is she gave one family, non-Jewish family, some of the pictures that you saw. A second non-Jewish family got some of our silverware. And the third family got some of my father's more expensive tools, all to be returned after the war, which incidentally they did. And then in September 1942, the street that we lived on was raided by the Nazis. What they did is they came in the middle of the night when everybody was sleeping. They sealed off both ends of the street with trucks and started pulling out the Jewish people from their homes at each end of the street. Okay, so you can see this is the street that we lived on. From here to here is number 34 Kortekiewicz. But when I went back 40 years later, they had renovated the house. So that's the reason why I took the picture this way. This is a mirror picture. That's really what it looked like that. It had this cornice, this overhang, which, as you can see, is missing here now. And so when they started pulling out the people, was a lot from each end of the street, and 34 Kortekiewicz incidentally was closer to the center of the street. So when people were being pulled out, there was a lot of yelling and screaming going on, which woke my mother up, and she looked out the bedroom window, which was right there, and she saw what was happening. And she quickly grabbed my baby sister, a blanket, and myself, and we went to the rear of the house. We went up to the top floor, to the rear of the house, where there was a metal ladder that was attached to the wall, leading up to a skylight onto the roof. The roof was a flat roof, and we walked from the rear of the house all the way to the front of the house, and we lay down underneath that cornice, which was here. Cornice is very short. It's like maybe 2 feet high. And when I got there, I quickly looked over the cornice to see what was going on. And I actually saw people being dragged in their night clothes. No luggage, nothing. And being put in the truck. But I only saw that for a second because my mother quickly grabbed me and pulled me down and put me under the blanket with herself and my baby sister. And we lay there, literally shivering, not knowing what was going to happen to us. A little later, we heard our door being broken in. Then there was a lot of commotion, which turned out they trashed the whole house. They didn't find us. But one soldier did go up that metal ladder. He opened up the skylight and it was pitch black out there. He had a flashlight. So he looked around because he was there and we were here under the blanket. He didn't see us. And so we closed the skylight, went back down. We heard more banging. It turned out they boarded up the front of the house so nobody could come in or out. We lay there, until my mother was sure that the raid was over. Now, I'm somewhat religious, and I believe a little miracle happened that night. I don't know how else to explain it. And the miracle was that my baby sister slept through that whole commotion. If she had cried, we would have been caught, and I would not be here to tell you the story. I don't know how to explain that except that it was a miracle. And so we stayed on the roof until my mother was sure that the raid was over, and we returned back inside, and there my mother lost it. I mean, the whole house, the inside of the house was trashed. Broken furniture, pots and pans all over the place, food smeared all over the place. It was bad. She sat there for a while and cried, and then she finally collected herself. And she decided to go and see one of our very good non-Jewish friends. He was a policeman in Antwerp, and he also was a member of the Belgium Underground. The Belgium Underground actually was a bunch of civilian people that banded together secretly to fight the Germans. And she was going to go see him. But she couldn't go out the front of the house anymore because it was boarded up, so she went out to the rear of the house. So we had like a little backyard, and it butted up against the train tracks, and on the other side was a street. That's how she left, went around the block, went to see our friend, came back later on, and told me that she had found a place to hide us. It was a Catholic convent. So the next night at the appointed time, we left the house the same way through the backyard. And this time there was a car waiting for us in the street. And the car took us out of town to the convent where my mother dropped us off. Only Superior knew who we were, no one else. None of the other sisters, none of the other children, none of the other workers, no one else. Now I'm going to tell you something special about my mother. My mother had a very, very hard time talking about the Holocaust. She couldn't talk about it. It was very emotional. And so it took me many, many years, I'm talking about 20, 30 years, to find a little piece here and a little piece there to be able to put the story together. And one of the things that I found out many years later was that when my mother dropped us off at the convent, she went back to Antwerp and she joined the Belgium Underground. And she became a courier, a messenger. So my sister and I, we stayed at the convent until the end of December 1942, it was around Christmas time, when suddenly my mother shows up to take us out. Why? Reason was that she found out through the Belgium Underground that the convent was going to be raided by the Nazis. And so she was going to take us out, and at the same time she warned Mother Superior that if she was hiding any other Jewish children there, to get rid of them, because at that time the edict was that if you were caught hiding Jews, you would be shot immediately. And I truly believe that with this one little action, my mother saved a few lives. So we were taken to another friend's house, a gentleman by the name of Mr. Goossens, who was also a member of the Underground, where we stayed for a short time until my mother was able to find another hiding place for us, which she did. This time she decided to split us up. So the next picture is, my sister went to live with a private Catholic family, and that's my sister Lillian, right there. And you can see she blended in quite well. They had 3 other children, and the cover story was that she was a distant member of the family that came to live with them temporarily during the war, which was quite common in those days. On the other hand, I went to a boys' orphanage. Next picture. So this is the orphanage that I went to 40 years later. It's in a village called Wilder, and the orphanage is still there, except it's not an orphanage anymore. It was actually a place for homeless people. And this wonderful priest, next picture, took care of me. His name is Father Igor Cornelissen, wonderful human being. And as soon as I got there, he ran 3 different orphanages, all boys orphanages. This was the one that I was in. And as soon as I got there, first thing he did is change my name. My name became Willie Peters, which is a very typical Belgian name. And the second thing that he did for me is he gave me false baptismal papers. So if anybody would ask me, I would say to them that I was Catholic, and here are the papers to prove. And it was a very good place, incidentally, to be. It was out in the country, as you can see over here. We learned farming. In addition to that, I went to parochial school every day. So, and also to church. So I was there for quite a few months when Father Cornelissen felt it was too dangerous for me to stay in one place too long. So he decided to send me to another orphanage that he ran in the French-speaking part of Belgium. There I continued to go to parochial school. Again, I continued going to church every day. Over there, however, I did one more thing. I became an altar boy. And that was really to blend in with the rest of the children. But in May 1944, we got raided by the Nazis. And I was caught. And the way I was caught was very simple. Since it was a boys' orphanage, they made all of us undress naked, and only the Jewish boys were circumcised. So I'd like to explain that a thing like that cannot happen today anymore, because a lot of non-Jewish boys get circumcised for medical reasons. But in Europe, at that particular time, only Jewish boys got circumcised. And that's how I got caught. Nothing helped, none of the papers helped, nothing else. And that's also, incidentally, how I found out that there were 5 other Jewish boys there. We all kept it very secret. So from there we were taken to prison and questioned. I actually wound up in 3 different prisons. And in the last prison, suddenly they rounded us up at night, a whole bunch of kids. None of us knew each other, and they put us on a freight train. As soon as we got on the train, the oldest boy, his name was Joseph, and he was only 16 years old, became our leader. And he urged us to escape from the train. And he had a plan. He was quite tall for his age, so he was the only one that wore long pants. We wore short pants, but he had long pants. Underneath his pants, he had boots, and inside one of the boots, he had a piece of steel about this long. Basically, he was using that, or going to use it if ever he needed it to protect himself. But instead, what he did is he pried away wood on the side of the freight train. It was not a passenger train, it was a wooden train. And he pried away wood to make an opening large enough for himself. He did all this while the train was moving. And when he was finished, he told us the following. He says, if the train stops, or if the train slows down enough, he says, I'm going to push you out one by one. And the only advice that I can give you is when you jump out of the train, roll away from the tracks to minimize getting hurt. And so at some point, the train never stopped, but did slow down enough because it was a sharp bend. It did slow down enough, and he said, "That's it," and he pushed us out, and all of us escaped. So after the train was gone, we had to do a couple of things. First, we had to find everybody. Also, remember, this is at night, so it's quite dark. We had to find everybody, which we did. And the second thing we had to do was to check everybody to find out if there were any broken bones or anything like that. And fortunately, no broken bones, just bleeding cuts and sprains. That's it. So we were quite fortunate there. And by that time, we were finished doing all these things. It was getting light outside, and we looked out in the distance, and we saw woods in the distance, and we all went as a group, and we hid in the woods. But after a while, we realized we didn't know where we were. So Joseph decided that he would venture out at night so he would not be seen, and he'll try to find out where we are. He came back the next morning and he said he believed that we were still in Belgium because he had seen a sign of a village called Perwez. That's spelled Perwez. Perwez. Sounds French, which means we're in the French part of Belgium. That was good news. But then after a day or two, things got very bad because we had no water, we had no food, the cuts were getting infected, sprains were getting worse, and Joseph just didn't know what to do. And he finally decided to do something very, very dangerous and at the same time very courageous. He decided to go back into the village of Perwez at the rectory next to the Catholic Church and talk to the priest and tell us. That was very dangerous because the priest could have said, "I'm sorry, I cannot help you." Or the priest could have said, "Just a moment," and gone and called the Germans and turned us in. But he didn't. He was very receptive and trying to save us. And what he did is he came up with this secret plan. What he did is he placed each one of us with a Catholic family in the village. The whole operation was so secretive, nobody knew who was where. Each family thought they had the only Jewish child, and only the priest knew where I was sitting. And this is the house that I was sitting in. 13 Rue de l'Église, and they hid me upstairs in their attic. Next picture. These are the people that hid me. Monsieur Gautier, Madame Gautier, very, very devout Catholic people, very religious, wonderful people. Their daughter Fernande, the next picture, their daughter Madeleine. Madeleine was 18, Fernande was 20. And they hid me in their attic, next picture. This is a picture of the attic when I went back 40 years later. And believe it or not, it looked identical to the way it was before. The only thing they had done is they had replaced the window, but the rest of the attic was totally unfinished. And so I stayed in that attic, and I had to be absolutely quiet. And the only time that I was allowed out was at night. Next picture, because they had a backyard. They had like 100-foot deep backyard. They grew their own vegetables, but you can also see it's surrounded by a wall. So I was allowed to go out at night to get some fresh air. And to keep me company, they bought me a pet rabbit so I could play with it. Now back to my mother. Again, this is information that I found out many, many years later. I did not know that my mother had kept track of me and that she had found out that I had been caught. So now she wanted to find out where I was there anything that she could do to help me, etc. And the way she was going to do all these things was she was going to see a Father André in the city of Namur, in Belgium. Father André is a righteous Gentile. If you go to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., I urge you to visit, of course, visit the museum, but definitely go into the section of the righteous Gentiles. There's a big picture of him over there because indeed he saved many, many lives. She was going to see him because, number one, he was a member of the Belgian Underground. Number two, he was a Catholic priest. And number three, he had excellent connections with the Germans. So she thought maybe he could find out where I was. Unfortunately for my mother, her timing was awful. The day my mother arrived in the city of Namur for the appointment, the Allies bombed the city, and my mother got caught in the air raid, and my mother completely lost her left leg in the air raid. And fortunately, she was found in the rubble. As a matter of fact, it turned out she was the only surviving person in that building, and they took her to a hospital in the city of Namur. Next picture. So back to me. I've been with the Boche family for quite a few months when we got liberated by the American troops in the fall of 1944. And this is the liberation picture. One of these, bad. But you can see an American soldier in uniform over here with a helmet, and he's actually on top of a jeep, sitting on top of the jeep, and people from their way surrounding the jeep. To give you some historical background, there was a big, big battle that occurred in Belgium in the winter of 1944 called the Battle of the Bulge. So we were liberated before that. Next picture. I'm very fortunate to have that picture. This is Father André right there. Except now he was young, he's got black hair. In the Holocaust Museum, you'll see he's got white hair. Father André was a very generous person. He lived in a very big house, and he hosted refugees after the war, people that were in transit. And one of the refugees happened to be my mother. That's my mother right there. You can see now she's got black hair, and she's kind of filled out. And she's wearing slacks. And you see she's got a shoe here, but no shoe there. And the reason being, she's wearing a peg leg. So to explain that to you, is when you lose a leg, the part that's left over is called a stump. And the stump has to heal, then to shrink down to size before you could be fitted with an artificial leg. So this was before she was fitted with an artificial leg, she wore a peg leg. Next picture. So since the war was over for us, an American organization called the Joint Distribution Committee came in and started to remove people and put them in either displaced persons camps or children homes. In this case, it happens to be a chateau called the Home de la Barre. Half the building was Jewish children, and the other half of the building were American soldiers. They were the soldiers that drove the trucks that supplied the troops. They were called the Bedwall Express. I want you to pay attention, however, to this round tower with the gray stripes. Next picture. There was a round tower with the gray stripes, and that's me. That's what I looked like. I was 13 years old at that time. We didn't have proper clothing. All these are hand-me-down clothes. We didn't have shoes. We wore these wooden clogs. So that's what I looked like, and I was 13 years old. After the war was actually over, which ended in May 1945, the American soldiers left. And now more Jewish children started arriving, filling up the chateau, except they were not from Belgium. They were from Germany and Poland and France and Holland. All the other countries that I had drawn and read, that's where all these children came from. All of these children were orphans. They all lost their families during the Holocaust. And that is how we started to learn. We had no idea what was happening. That's how we started to learn what had happened during the Holocaust. It was by word of mouth, people telling other people. There was no news, internet or instant news. It was just people telling people. And when we wound up major problems. I mean, some of us were physically sick, some of us were mentally sick, some of us were emotionally sick, and they realized, that we needed more personal attention. So they took 50 of us and put us in another home in a village called Provençal, where a Dr. and Mrs. Jaffe took loving care of us. He was a medical doctor, she was a psychologist, and they actually had to teach us, imagine that, had to teach us how to be children again. I'm talking about not to be afraid, laugh, play games, go to the movies, play tricks on each other, do all the things that kids normally do. We had to learn that all over again. And also they were nice enough to also bring us back to Judaism, because many of us had not practiced Judaism for several years. It was a wonderful time, except for me, it was a very, very bad time. The reason being is as more and more people were coming back from the concentration camps, 3 different people came back and told my mother that my father was not coming back, that he had died in the concentration camp called Auschwitz. And that was a very big blow to me, because I was very attached to my father. And not only that, that was one of the reasons, we wanted to live, was to be reunited with our families. And our family was not going to be whole anymore. Now back to my sister. When my mother was getting better, she wanted to have my sister back. And the people that hid my sister had grown very, very fond of her. Remember, my sister went to live with them when she was 3 years old, and now it is 3 years later, 1946. Now she's 6 years old. They did not want to give her up. They were giving my mother a very hard time. And it turns out, and that's by pure coincidence, this is my father's younger brother, my Uncle Murray. He came to Europe and fought in the European theater, and then after the war was over, he started looking for my mother, and he found my mother just at the time that my mother was trying to get my sister out. And he said, I'll take care of it, and he did, and he used his influence as an American soldier to get my sister out. However, that part of the story is very, very sad. The family that hid my sister were so hurt that my sister was taken away that they cut off all communications, and we were never able to get in touch with them again. We were never even able to thank them for what they did for us. They put their lives at stake, and we were not even able to thank them for it. Very, very sad. In the meanwhile, it turns out that my mother had made arrangements with my Uncle Murray that when he got back to the United States, that he would have our family sponsor us so we could come here. So you have to skip 2 pictures. Skip. That's it. Thank you. And these are the shipping pages. You can see the shipping papers up for the three of us. We left the city of Antwerp. Antwerp was a big port of embarkation of people at that particular time, people coming to the United States. Many people left from Antwerp. And we left on April 7th, 1948. And it was a 10-day voyage. We arrived in New York City on Pier 48 on April 17th, 1948. It's going to be many, but how many years now next week? And next picture. This is what we look like. My sister Lillian, my mother, and myself. This picture was taken at the Seder. It happened to be April, it was Passover time, and we went to our family Seder, and that's what we looked like when we got there. And I'd like to share one more thing before I conclude with you. And this event happened, you know, when we went to the Holocaust. We went, meaning my sister and I, we went to the Holocaust Museum. We wanted to donate some personal items, but it turns out that we were there on a Sunday, and the archive section was closed on a Sunday. So they told us to go to the library to fill out forms. And so while we were filling out the forms, you know, the librarian started a conversation with me, and when she found out that we were from Belgium, and that my father had died in Auschwitz, she got very excited because here we were on Sunday, and just that previous Thursday, only a couple of days before, she had received a book from Belgium listing all the Jews that had been deported from Belgium to Auschwitz. And that's what a page looks like. It's just a bunch of columns, you know, with numbers. So this is what I found out about my father. Chaim Goldschmidt, of course, that's his name. What gave it away was his birthday. He was born on August 30th, 1903. That's important because I Googled myself. There's another 65 Daniel Goldsmiths here in the United States. So you need my birthday to get the right Daniel Goldsmith. But what really got me excited was this. Transport number 16, prisoner number 942. This is the first time, you know, they had any kind of documentation about my father. Otherwise, it had been people telling my mother. And then now I got excited and I went back to the librarian and asked her, can I pursue this any further? And she said, yes. Next picture. And she came back with another book. This one, I have to tell you, blew my mind. This was originally written in German. Of course, it's been translated in all languages. And believe it or not, the Nazis were so accurate, they kept daily records of what happened every single day from 1939 to 1945. Incredible. So knowing that my father was deported in August 1942, I went to a page, you know, in the section of 1942, and this is what pertains to my father. Next picture. I'll read it to you, because I got to explain. It says 1,696 Jews arrived from Malines in Belgium in 2 transports. 16 transports. That's the transport my father was on. There are 683 men, 21 boys, 89 women, and 29 girls. I mean, this is how accurate they were. In 17, 622 men, 51 boys, 165 women, 36 girls. You can ask questions later. Okay? After selection, what selection meant was that when the trains arrived in Auschwitz, they arrived in a section called Birkenau, Auschwitz-Birkenau, and the people were let off the train onto a platform, and there was a German officer that would look at you on the platform, and he would say, to the left, to the right. He would point to the left, to the right. One way you were going to die, one way you were going to live. You had no idea though at that time. That was called selection. And of the 1,696, only after selection, only 702 men and 75 women from both transports are admitted to the camp. And then they also list the serial numbers. These are the numbers that were tattooed on the arms. Because when you got into that concentration camp, you completely lost your identity. You're only known by a number. They listed, these are the numbers for the men, 72,000 series, and 23,000 series for the women. So I went and looked up those numbers, and I did not find my father's name among them. So the last sentence says it all. The remaining 919 people are killed in the gas chamber. And that's what happened to my father. So in conclusion, I'd like to say the following, that my mother, my sister, and I, we were lucky to survive. And unfortunately, we never told our story until 1995. I told the story to my family, but that's about all. And my mother could hardly talk about it. But now, as the older generation is dying, it's imperative that we tell our story. So let me tell you how come I came to speak. Steven Spielberg, the movie maker, he created a foundation called the Shoah Foundation. The purpose of the Shoah Foundation was to video record as many Holocaust survivors as possible. I think they've done like over 53,000 to date. They came to my house to videotape me, and it is the young lady who did the interviewing who urged me to speak. She says it's important because the older people are dying. And so I want to impress on you, you are the last generation that will see a live Holocaust survivor. Now, explain that. When you finish school, you go to high school, then you go to college, then you get a job, then you get married, then you have your own children, which is the next generation. By that time, all of us will have passed on. So you are the last generation to see a live Holocaust survivor. So it's important that we never forget what happened in Europe in the Nazi era. It's important that it never happens again. I'm not so sure that we learned our lesson. Look at the genocide in Darfur, in Rwanda. And therefore we must act against evil and prejudice, intolerance, anti-Semitism, and hatred. I am urging you, please do not hate. You're doing yourself a disservice by hating anybody. It's a bad word and bad feelings. Do not hate. I'm expressing again my personal opinion. If there was no hate in this world, I truly believe there would have never been a Holocaust. Don't hate. So we must learn to be tolerant of other people, other faiths, other colors, other backgrounds. So the lesson here is you should be decent to all people. And what I'm asking you is to become righteous human beings who refuse to be indifferent when you see something wrong. When you see something wrong, don't turn away. Say something or do something. Don't walk away. And lastly, it's also important that we counter the revisionists, those other people who say the Holocaust never happened. Well, I'm telling you, it did happen. I was there. I saw it. I survived it. And I'm a living witness to it. Thank you for listening.
Some questions. When you speak, if you could stand up and speak as loudly as you can. I'll repeat it if you need to. But we'll take about 10 minutes of questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Stand up.
Is your sister still alive?
Okay, the question is, my sister still alive today? Absolutely. I just saw her the other day. We had a Seder at my house, and she came to my Seder. We're very close. I live in Hatboro, and she lives in Warminster, Warminster. So we're only like 5 minutes away from each other. We're very close. My mother and my sister and I were always close. We stayed close together. Next question.
The question was it scary to be under a false name and a false identity?
Yes, it was. And it was the whole thing was very scary because even though I knew that these people were trying to protect me, nevertheless I lived in total fear because my fear was getting caught. I thought for sure, that if I got caught, I would die. So I did live in fear. But I also realized that the things that my mother did for me, like putting me in the orphanage, was very important because that's the only way that we could survive. And our goal basically was to survive so we could be reunited after the war and be a family again and live a normal life.
What was it like to learn again how to be a child? Again?
Oh, it was, I had very mixed emotions. The reason being, living in fear for 4 years, it doesn't go away instantly. And so when they said, it's okay to do this, like for instance, one of the tricks that we played was on April Fool's Day, we slept in dormitories in that house, that building in Port François. All the girls slept in one dormitory, all the boys slept in another dormitory. And came April Fool's Day, the boys, including myself, we quietly went into the girls' dormitory and we stole all their shoes. And we took them and we tied them together, shoelaces, we tied them together. And we did this, we thought it was very funny, but then suddenly one of us, we were afraid that somebody was going to punish us for doing that. So this is where the emotions were mixed, we had good emotions, for playing the trick, bad emotions, when things were. By the way, the girls got back at us. Just want to let you know that. And those, we don't have that anymore. In those days, the flies on the boys' pants were with buttons, not zippers. The girls stole all our pants and cut off the buttons. But it took a while, I have to say this, it took a while, but we really adjusted well, eventually.
What was it like jumping off the train?
What was it like?
Jumping off it was very, very scary, because, but you didn't you didn't do it yourself, that's another thing, by the way. I would crouch down in front of the opening, and he pushed us. Okay, so it's like, the chances are, and I'll say this, speak for myself, I wouldn't jump. I was too scared, but he pushed. So it was very, very scary.
How old were you when World War II ended?
I was 13 years old when World War II ended. 13.
When you jumped off the train, did you get any bruises or anything?
No, I was one of the people, I sprained my ankle. So it took a while. I mean, it swelled up. I mean, real big. I had a hard time walking and all that. But that's what happened to me.
Oh yeah, also like, how did it get better? Like, how did it start? Hospitals?
No, I didn't go through a hospital. what happened was, you have to understand the timing, okay? We jumped off the train, got hurt, right? We went into the woods. We stayed there for a few days only until things got really bad. Remember I mentioned that, and then Joseph went into town and spoke to the priest, and he placed each one of us with a family. It was the Boche family, the people that you saw in the pictures over here, that took care of me. They actually put my ankle in salt water, In those days in South Africa, that's another thing. We didn't have pharmacies. They had apothecaries, because a lot of the people that were pharmacists, they actually made up their own medication, so to speak. They had a mortar and pestle, and they ground it all, and they did that themselves. And so, whatever they did to help me, they went to the pharmacy, to get that. But they were the ones that helped heal my ankle.
2, 3.
Did you feel that you could trust everyone after the war? Did you just scary after the war?
So you talk about the trusting people after the war. The answer is no. I didn't trust people after the war, because you didn't know who was what I would call a bad person that worked with the Germans and turned other people in. So you didn't know that. So you really did not trust people. The trust came gradual. It took, a year or two before you could trust anybody. And in order to be able to trust them, you had to get to know them first.
7.
Did you ever get to speak to a Nazi soldier?
Do you have ever had the opportunity or chance to speak to a Nazi soldier?
The only time that I actually came in contact with 2 occasions that I came in contact with German soldiers. The first one was, remember when we were fleeing Belgium, we were trying to go to northern France, and the Germans caught up with us. So the Germans were the ones that told us, they did, at that particular time, they were not looking for Jewish people or anything like that. They were just saying, you're from Belgium, turn around and go back wherever you came from. So that was just German soldiers telling us to go back. That was not a problem. The second time, second time that I got to talk with the German soldiers was when I got caught. That was not pleasant at all. And they treated us like dirt. They treated us very, very badly.
How did they not catch you when you were getting off the train?
It turns out that when we got off the train, the area that we were in was like farmland. Well, first of all, number one, we jumped off the train at night. That's number one. I don't know whether we would have been able, to do the same things, during the day. But it was at night. Number two, we were out in farmland, in an area that were growing vegetables. So all we had to do is, like I told you, we had to collect everybody, we had to find everybody. And by the time that we did all that, it was getting light, and we were looking out in the distance that we saw the woods, and we went as a group, we hid in the woods. Did I answer your question?
When you were jumping off the train,
How did they not hear you?
Oh,
Trains moving.
because the train was moving. Have you ever been on a train? You hear this clickety-clack, the sound of the train. So when the train is moving, you hear the sound of the wheels, going on the metal rails. That is noise that actually prevents them, from hearing us jumping out. Because when you jump out, the only time that you're making any noise is when you hit the ground. That's it. So the clickety-clack actually overcame the noise of jumping out of the train.
I have two questions. One, where did you go in the USA?
When we went to in the USA, the first thing that we did is we lived in the Bronx, New York. My mother lived with one aunt and uncle, I lived with another aunt and uncle, and my sister lived with another aunt and uncle. My mother didn't want that. She wanted us to be a family. So she went to an organization called the HIAS. It's IAS. It's called the Hebrew Immigration Aid Society in New York. And they are the ones that found us an apartment in Brooklyn. And we were finally able, to live together in an apartment in Brooklyn.
And the second question what was the name of your bunny?
You'll never guess Morris. Morris.
Yes.
Did you ever go back to Auschwitz to visit the concentration?
Yes, very good question. I finally had enough courage 2 years ago to go to Auschwitz. I just wanted to see where my father died. Now, Auschwitz, the men's barracks, that section really has all totally disintegrated. Now, 70 years later, it has totally disintegrated, but they do have 6 buildings that are replicas of what the old buildings used to look like. And I had an excellent guide. I told the guide the day my father arrived in Auschwitz and the day he was gassed, he said that gas chamber no longer exists. So I didn't see the gas chamber anymore. But I'll tell you this much. If you go to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and you see the hair, you'll see hair over there, large pieces of hair that were cut off people. You see people's luggage. You'll see pots and pans. You'll see medical, what do you call these, like artificial legs and artificial limbs and all that. In the Holocaust Museum, it's a small display. When you go to Auschwitz, imagine a corridor about this long. And one side of the corridor is nothing but window. And behind that window, imagine, is nothing but hair. Not only that, the hair that they shaved off the hair of the inmates. The hair of the babies that they shaved off, believe it or not, is turning gray. Incredible. It's an awful, awful feeling of seeing all that.
We're gonna take 4 more questions. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Did your sister also have a story like you did?
Did your sister also share her story?
No, my sister can't share a story because remember, my sister was 3 years old. What do you remember when you were 3 years old? Nothing, really, So from 3 to 6, all she knows, she does not know anything about the war. She knows about the family. She does remember the family that she lived with, but she doesn't know about the war. And everything that she knows basically is what my mother told her.
How did you feel when you found out that your mom was the Allied bomb?
How did I feel? Well, I just want to say this. I did mention that in my story. It was the Boje family who found my mother in the hospital in the city of Namur. And they brought me to see her. And guess what? I didn't recognize my mother. Because my mother, at that time, she was only 40 years old. And she looked like an old woman. She had white hair. Her complexion was very, very pale. And she was all skin and bones because she was not eating properly and she had lost a tremendous amount of blood. And that person just didn't look like my mother. But of course, she recognized me, you know, and it turned out that once I got to recognize my mother as to who she was, it turned out to be a great moment for us because my mother was alive, my sister was alive, I was alive, and at that particular time, we did not know what had happened to my father. We had hoped he was alive, you know, and we could be reunited and be a family again.
Did you ever question your religion?
Did I ever question my religion? The answer is no. And I'll tell you why. I had a very, very religious upbringing. My parents were very Orthodox, what we call Orthodox. And like I told you, also went to Hebrew school. And I also knew that I should never, you know, forget who I am. As a matter of fact, those were the last words that my mother told me when I went into hiding in the not in the convent, but in the orphanage. She says, "Don't forget who you are and what you are." And so outwardly, I will say this much: I was Catholic. I practiced Catholicism, you know, so nobody would suspect me. But inwardly, I remained Jewish, and I never questioned my faith.
We're gonna stop with that question, in
Sorry.
terms of our time. Let's give them one more time. Really good. And as you can see today, this is a blessing for all of us to be able to hear a story personally. I hope you have some time to reflect for yourself personally, but also feel free to ask questions, just like